Okay, I'd like to show everybody the MeasureQ grant application process. Just walk through it real quick. So after you've registered your username and profile, and you've said to start an application, it brings you to the project overview page. This project overview page is universal for everyone. Same for the tier 1 and tier 2 grants. Your application automatically creates an ID. And then you scroll down to project type. This is where you'll select a tier 1 or tier 2 type of a grant. So for this demonstration, I'm going to use the tier 2. It's a little bit more involved, but the tier 1 is very similar. So I select the type of grant, and then I'm going to type in the project title. There's a brief title, so 30 words or so. Then you'll have an opportunity to select your organization from a drop-down list. If it's not on this list, you can say not listed, and then you can state your new organization name. And then you'll put in your contact information if it's different than the person. So I'm going to put myself in there and my title. And then you can add additional folks that could access the grant portal here by adding another user. And then what we'd like to have you do is type in an address. This could be an address of where the project is, if it's a single location, or an APN. It could also be a nearest address. So for this example, I'm just going to type in 701 Ocean Street. And then it also collects the latitude and longitude. This is going to help us down the line when we start to map grant awards. Then you'll scroll down further and have an opportunity to share a little bit of the additional geographic information. So if it's in the unincorporated county and any of the cities, you can select as many of these as you'd like. Or if it's just in the unincorporated county, or if it's a program that's countywide, you can select that as well. And then you'll just kind of describe the area, regions, or if it's a countywide program here. If you know any of your council, city council, or board of supervisor, or if it's in the city, you can add that information here. And then again, if it's a countywide thing, or if it's in a specific supervisor's district, we ask you to the best of your ability to check that. It's not mandatory, but we're just trying to capture as much information in terms of where your project is proposed to be. And then you have a little narrative here to describe the where. Similarly, this should be pretty universal for everybody, but you can put which assembly district and what state senator district you're in. And then if your project is in a disadvantaged community or severely disadvantaged community, and those definitions are right below, you can select those. For this example, I'll just say no. Then what we want to do is collect a little bit of information about what kind of environmental compliance you might have in hand or need for the project. It might not need anything, or you might not know. So you can start by just expressing if there's some elements that you are aware of here in the top. So in this instance, I'll just say nothing has been started. And then we're asking you if you know of any permits that you might need. So I think I'm going to need all of these. So I would select yes to all of these. I might enter a comment that says I've started, or enter a status that has complete. You can say you're not sure. This is us just trying to capture a little bit of information about what you're contemplating and what your preparedness is to implement it if it does require permits in particular. And then there's a short narrative here where you can elaborate with narrative text. Then we're asking you to determine kind of how long this project is going to take. So you select a unit. So I'm going to say it's going to take 12 months. And I'm going to say, yes, the project can start upon award. And then we can describe its readiness or what's needed to get it ready. And then what we're trying to do here is to have you describe how you're going to measure the success of this grant. Is it acres, miles, residents protected, population served, outreach population, education, or base or other. So I'm just going to pick acres treated, and I'm hoping to treat 10 acres with this project. Then we get to our funding. This is a very basic budget where we're trying to get you to give us the rough numbers in these various buckets of what you think it's going to cost, or the accurate numbers, but so you can enter whatever numbers you need here in any of these categories or one of these categories, and then we'll review that later together. And then obviously, if you're in a tier 1 grant, you'll only be allowed to apply for up to $50,000. Tier 2 can go above that. Then we ask you for an executive summary here, 250 words. And then the second page, once you hit save and continue, it's going to save all that information that you can always go back and change things. And it's going to bring up the second page. The second page, again, so I'm in the tier 2 program. You can see that tier 2 community impact grants. The tier 1 is very similar, and I'm going to describe a little bit of the difference. So both of these second pages or second parts reflect the sections of the scoring rubric. And so for the tier 2, there's a number of sections. You'll see there's section 1, section 2, community benefits, section 3, wildlife and environmental benefit, section 4, project readiness and feasibility, section 5, partnerships and collaboration, section 6, budget and leverage of resources, section 7, long-term maintenance and monitoring, and section 8 is the optional bonuses. This corresponds to the scoring rubric, and similarly in the tier 1, these sections correspond to the 4 scoring sections in the tier 1 grants. So for this first section, we're looking at what is your alignment with the vision plan in 3 ways. One is in the thematic area. So if you recall, the vision plan prioritized parks, recreation, access, wildlife, wildfire risk reduction, and forest health, and water resource management. Those were the 3 primary focus areas or thematic areas that were prioritized, but your project may touch on wildlife and habitat or coastal in addition to those, or it may not touch on any of those 3. And then we want you to give us a narrative about how your project is addressing the thematic areas that you selected. The second 2 sections also are reflected in the vision plan, and there's the project prioritization principles and the secondary prioritization principles. So here you'll check whichever, this is a multi-benefit project and you'll provide some narrative, or this is a climate resilience, high climate resilience, and you'll give yourself a narrative in this prioritization principles. And then in the vision plan, there were secondary principles, prioritization principles around public benefit, readiness, or strategic alignment. And you can check whichever ones are relevant there and then add your narrative. Then you come into section 2, community benefit. Who is this project going to serve? How are they going to be better served? And here you can say the community value areas. This is adding access to nature and access to recreation, health and well-being, whatever applies. And then your narrative is describing why you had those check boxes. The third section, wildlife and environmental benefit. You can select what this project is going to do in these 3 categories. Mine maybe is just going to be a climate resilience and habitat project. It's not going to deal much with water quality. And then you would provide a narrative to describing that. Under the project readiness and feasibility, this is touched on a little bit in that first page in terms of permits that you might have. But then here you also say, you also are stating that if this project includes ground disturbance or not. So I'll say yes. And then required permits narrative. This is describing what you understand as required permit processes, what approvals are needed. So if this does include ground disturbance, do you own the property that it's happening on? Do you have a right of entry to do the work, or an MOU? So describing what approvals or agreements are needed to do the work if the work is on your property and others, or if it's on just your property, you'd state that here. And then timeline and key milestones and team capacity. What is your experience doing this type of project or this type of work? And then under the site control section, again, you might own the property, or you might have a written agreement, or you don't have a written agreement to conduct the project. But we're going to ask you to explain why you don't have a written agreement. So you'll check whatever is appropriate here and then describe your feasibility site control elements. Partnerships and collaboration is pretty straightforward. Are there any partners or relationships that are helping you produce this project, or any unique collaborations with community or stakeholder groups? Then in the budget section, we just want you to give a narrative to how you're proposing to use the funds that you described on that first sheet, as well as an indirect cost rate and any maintenance costs that you might need. And then for these tier twos, we're wanting to understand kind of what might be the long-term maintenance and monitoring of this project. Might have none. So you would say none. If it does, you'd say yes. And you don't have funding, or you do have funding, and then you would describe kind of how your maintenance plan is going to unfold. The last section gives you the opportunity to select one of the different options for bonus points, or bonus percentage points, and then also gives you a chance to say that that this project is aligned with a state or local plan, and then you can fill that plan name in, and provide a URL for where we can find that plan. And then there's the narrative associated with that as well. Then there's an opportunity to add additional content if you have any. None of this is required, but project sitemap might be important if the project location information on the prior page needs more visuals. A more detailed budget spreadsheet is likely advised and recommended if it's a very big and complex project. Any letters of support, a project timeline, and then any other organizational information if you weren't already in the system, or any permit information. And then you're going to acknowledge that this application and the scoring will be made public as part of the selection process. You're going to select that I certify and your name, and then you would hit save if you want to hit save and work on it later, or you would hit submit. So this is just a quick walkthrough of the grant portal. I'm sure there'll be other questions. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the county. The best way to reach us is at the measureq@santacruzcountyca.gov email. Again, that's measureq@santacruzcountyca.gov email. And with that, I'll stop the presentation and hope your grant application goes well.